Okay, my name is Sala Ross and I'm a student of LSDS, and my subject area is secondary data. Is secondary data enough for the support of research work? When we look at secondary data, the definition is that it has already been collected and collated by someone else for the purpose other than the current study. It can be used to give a new perspective on things in that current study, or it can be used as a supplement and to compare with the work of one work to another. Secondary data has been known by researchers to have certain advantages and disadvantages, and it can be relied on the advantages for the purpose of being inexpensive and fast, easily available, obtainable, right? It provides that easy basis for comparison. It avoids data collection problems, right? And it's very unobscured, right? Secondary data, on the other hand, need to be looked at in this context of this research, whereby we are looking at whether it is sufficient. And in looking at whether it's sufficient, we need to look at its drawbacks. What are the disadvantages of secondary data? And looking at its drawbacks, we see that data may not be relevant or current to that particular study that one may be seeking, right? And how current the data is for a specific field, it may not be worth it. So we need to look at ways in which these things can be improved. We look at the susceptibility of errors and accuracy in secondary data, right? We're known to have that. Secondary data, we need to be mindful of the fact that it can be a presence of bias in the literature, and that they may have significant differences for your purpose with regards to the design and the methodology, which is key for the basis for some of the research work. Secondary data can be from many sources. It can be on a documentary source. You can look at multiple sources. You can look from surveys, where you look at government surveys, you look at organizational surveys, and you have the media through television, through video recording. You have the internet, which is now we know through Facebook, the social network, and probably through the internet, through Google, where a lot of people were able to just put in the information that they're requesting and make it resourceful and have it available. So secondary data can have many different sources, right, in terms of the database. It could come from an organizational level, it could come from the website, it could come from the internet, it could come from personnel. There are a wide range of sources of secondary data. The purpose of this research that I'm about to do is to evaluate whether secondary data can stand on its alone by itself for the purpose of research. And given the fact that we know that we have the disadvantages of secondary data, we're a little bit concerned about the impact it can have on research work. What, if any, most trend users, we're trying to investigate what, if any, is most trend users using for secondary data for research work today. Is there a possibility that secondary data can be improved or not? Can researchers depend on it alone to produce the desired outcome? And when we tend to look at the areas that we have been done in recent studies for secondary data, we look at the medical field. My main focus is to be looking at the medical field. We look in particularly nurses and how nurses have used secondary data in the purpose of gathering information or relying on information to deal with a sick patient, or to provide the information to give to doctors or anybody who may be in use of their information to enhance their work on a day-to-day basis. So a study needs to be looked at how the nurses use secondary data to improve research work or to complement research work for the people out in their environment. Another area that I'm going to be looking at is how universities, persons like myself, students, for the purpose of research work, use secondary data for the purpose of the study. How much of the information can be relied on, is it relevant, and all these different issues we're going to look at in terms of the university. And then we're going to look at a key area in my study which I did in the past, marketers. How marketers evaluate how much marketing information is heavily on departments, on their marketing departments for secondary data. We learned how forward-looking corporate companies are using marketing experts to design response surveys, and they can learn from their employees and customers. And through that, they may need to even go beyond secondary data. They may need to look at primary data. They may need to look at other mediums, the internet, IT, for example, how they work their packages together in coming up with an outcome that is a desired outcome that they may be able, as marketers, to come out with products that their customers would be happy with, or what is expected of them. Can really marketers look at secondary data, the history of trends and performances, to rely on to do their work? And from my history, just from my history, without doing the investigation, we know that relying on secondary data may be very limited, with results in limited products. When we look at the rationale for this study, we said that we are focusing on the drawbacks of secondary data, and we are looking at how researchers still find this information enough for their desired outcome. And the second rationale that we are going to look at in the dissertation is, in the world today where technology has influenced the way that information could be provided, easily provided through internet or through cell phones, through mobile, through texting, can we look at the use of technology? If we do find in our study that secondary data is not enough, can we now complement it with primary as well as technology to improve that accuracy on secondary data? Because we know one of the drawbacks is that secondary data may be irrelevant, and technology can help with that. And the accuracy would mean that the information is now there when it is needed, in a cost-efficient way, of course. The philosophy and approach is using the work plan design. I would investigate, as I said, the local university here on island, the general hospital here on island, and I would look for a group of executive marketers who can collate and give me the information of their corporate marketing strategies as to how they link their environment of looking at secondary data to plan the course of their budgets or their future marketing plan for the company. How do they go about, how do they operate, and how much of secondary data they do rely on? Is it percentage-wise? Do they interact with their customers and do surveys and stuff like that? And I would do it in the form of different methodologies. The methodology I would use is a design work plan, which would be done by a qualitative analysis, where a general sample by way of survey, questionnaires, interview, and observation will be done. In the environment where it would be a participatory, the environment would be sort of participatory and projective approach in describing the current methodology of the operation. Assessment to determine the level of primary, secondary data used in order to perform the studies, and what role does technology have in the mix. So that is what it would be. The research strategy that I would employ in my dissertation on my research would be deductive reasoning through action research. And that is one key thing that I would be doing. That's my strategy. The design would entail the collection of data, as I said, through the surveys and so, which would be tested by a hypothesis theory. Regardless of the challenge with the secondary data, I would want to make sure that it addresses its shortcomings and deduce whether or not the possible recommendations are there for improvement. To create a further integration, right? That is one of the strategy I have. To create a further integration of research planning using different types of methodology. The benefits of this strategy. The benefits of the strategy that I would be using, I would say, is to raise an awareness among researchers among the inclement potential, or the inclement potential, that improved secondary data can have on research work. It would lead to savings in costs, and in some fields saves lives, and can be up to date in this fast-moving environment. It makes research findings more accessible and to cross-reference key factors in the specific area of interest. What do I expect to achieve at the end of this dissertation? I expect to get that each area show that there are deficiencies by just using secondary data alone for research work, and that they have already advanced with the use of technology to enhance their research, where they are with it. That secondary data can be improved by the assistance of primary and technology for researchers. However, we need to look at the limitations that my research may encounter. And some of the limitations will be influence of external forces on the research material, which they may have political slants or organizational pressures and powers that may influence. So we need to leave room for that. Then organizational structure in place to capture. Each organization might have a different style, so we need to keep in mind that there may be limitations to that in terms of the organizational structure. The openness of the environment, of the targeted areas of research to obtain the necessary information and their findings. And the inability of the environment to see how conducive it is to research work. And with that, I would say it would be the main focus on how I would approach my dissertation on secondary data, which I am heartfelt and enthusiastic to start. Thank you.